The canyon section was the Mesa Southern's last great gamble. Pushing track through that terrain required an engineering effort wildly out of proportion to the traffic it would ever carry. Sheer cliff faces, unstable rock, and brutal desert heat claimed lives and devoured budgets in equal measure. But the directors pressed on, the same overconfidence that had built a monumental station for a town of a few hundred souls. Backed by land grants and borrowed money, now sent crews blasting into the rock. When the panic of 1873 hit, the bills came due all at once. Credit vanished overnight. The canyon line, the grand station, the miles of track to nowhere, it all collapsed together. The Mesa Southern was finished. Its rails and its debts passed quietly to the Great Southern and Continental Railway, and Redmont moved on.
Hello, and welcome back to Redmont. I'm sorry about the delay getting this episode out. It's been a very hectic couple of weeks, and I've been plagued with numerous technical issues that have really slowed everything down this week. First thing we're going to be doing in this episode is we're going to be densifying this neighborhood right down here. It's going to be upping the density from low density residential to medium density. The city has a huge demand for residential right now, so it made sense to add some density. And this seemed like the perfect neighborhood where the density would occur naturally. This would be one of the more older neighborhoods in the city. It's also now attached to what's rapidly becoming an office district. So density here made the most sense. I was going to be moving over the high school and the fire station, get them off the main street there. For our assets for this one, I'm mostly going to be sticking with the Northeast pack and the Southwest pack for the medium density. Northeast for kind of like to imagine older buildings in the neighborhood, and the Southwest for newer construction done in the last, say, 50 years or so. This wasn't meant to be the focus of this episode, but by increasing all this density right here in this location, it will eventually start to put immense pressure on our road network. We only have 2 or 3 major bridge crossings at the moment, and I'm going to run into some problems later on where that's just not enough to manage all the traffic going across the river. It kind of derails the focus of this particular episode, and it becomes more about managing infrastructure. I don't show a lot of it in the video because that wasn't really what I was planning to do for this episode. It kind of became a huge distraction about halfway through the build. Some of the technical issues I had this week was I had, I think, at least 2 saves become corrupted. So I lost a ton of work. So right here, this is kind of just a recreation of one of the segments I lost here. What was supposed to be the focus for this episode was detailing out this whole entire canyon region here. This is supposed to be a major feature for the build. Now, from the height map I used, this is an area just east of Grand Junction, Colorado, and this canyon actually does exist. It's a little larger in real life. This is a 2-to-1 scale, so it's a little compacted here. But in the real world, a rail line does follow down through this canyon area to get down to the wider valley down by Grand Junction. So this is the most logical area to put a rail track. Because of how height maps work in game, the landscapes always become a little mushy, so it didn't feel very finished to me. So just recently, which was perfect timing for this episode, we now have these brand new cliff assets that have been added to the game. You can find these on the PDX mod store. Did a little recreation here just to kind of show them off a little bit. These are quite nice. We have some very large rocks, but we also have these cliff faces. These are perfect. I've been waiting for something like this to come out, so I'm very happy to see them. It will help me detail up quite a few areas on the map. I need this sort of asset in order to make the landscape look a little more authentic. These have some really nice features to them. The top surfaces, the grass surfaces on the top, they're transparent and they will show whatever the map surface underneath them is. So these automatically, the grass surfaces on top of these match the grass surfaces that are native to the map. And I can also recolor them. So the colors, I can make the colors a little more reddish in tone, reddish orange. So now the cliff faces actually match the rock colors native to this region as well, which is great. I wasn't expecting that kind of functionality from this sort of asset, but it's wonderful to see. Okay, so a little bit of a jump here. This is the footage that did survive, or the gameplay that survived. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be basically just laying them out roughly. I'll come back here and fine tune this as I go, but I'm just laying out the cliffs. We have some of these very large rocks and stones, which are really nice. As I'm building this, I'm just trying to figure out how to place these, what would be a good way to lay these out that makes the most sense of following the natural terrain. Just getting a rough idea of where they might belong. It looks pretty messy right now. And then come back in here and recolor them all. I do come back a little later and just slightly alter some of the colors a little bit, so there's a bit more variety from one to another. They are a little repetitive. Still nice to see them in game. I'm going to be using the Move It tool here, selecting all of them, leveling them out so they all are roughly around the same height. There are a few seams and stuff that I have to come back and do a bit of trickery to kind of hide. They don't line up perfectly, but you know, a little hand placing here, we can get them looking pretty good. Now I have this really horrible tunnel section here. I hate the tunnels in this game. I'm going to disguise it with a rock outcropping here. I was going to place a bunch. I do have to come back here and fix that tunnel at some point. I just hate building tunnels so much in this game. I will do anything to try to avoid working with them. I'll also have to do some terrain alterations here just to blend the natural map terrain in with the cliff surfaces as best as possible. It's not perfect, but I'll have to use a number of different tricks here to kind of disguise them a little bit so it's not so obvious where there's like seams and edges and hollow sections and stuff like that. Now, along the base of the cliffs, I'm going to be using some of Gaga XM's surfaces here. These are his rock surfaces. So we got everything from like kind of like gravel up to like larger stones. To hide some of the imperfection, I'm going to have to resort to using some trees here. One issue that cropped up here is like the tree brush works perfectly fine on the actual terrain. We can place trees on top of the cliffs using there's a stick to surfaces button that we can use to place trees on top of other objects, which will work on top of the cliffs. Unfortunately, the tree brush tool does not work in this setting. So I have to come back in here and hand place individual trees on top of the cliffs. But this is kind of necessary just to disguise the edge just a little bit. Add a few trees along the bottom of the cliffs here, just to blend the edge in. I do realize after the fact that coming back in here later that these trees are way too big. These are only meant to be kind of like scrubland, right? So I'll have to come back in here and reduce the size of these a bit. So it looks really nice right here, but it doesn't, when you get down very close to them, like from looking from the road and stuff, it doesn't look realistic at all. So I'll have to come back in here and change this out a little bit. Okay, for our rail line, this will take a bit of terraforming to get to snake through the canyon section here. I've said in a previous episode, I'm not necessarily going for a totally realistic railroad layout, but I do want it to be realistic looking. Like, I don't want the slopes or anything to look too unnatural. I think right down here, this slope I'm on to get under the bridge, I think it's about 2%. In game, it looks totally fine. The real world, that's probably too much. For the game, I think it would be okay. I don't think it's any issue. The rail line's going to follow the south bank of the river, and it's going to require terrain alterations in several locations to get it to fit. This is perfectly acceptable for like a narrow canyon section like this. A rail line would, like the company, they would blast out the appropriate channel for a track. So this sort of terrain alteration is, I think, totally acceptable. This would be a difficult section of rail to construct, but it is also the most logical route to take to get down to the flatter valley area beyond. As you can see, it's mostly flat down here, or very subtle elevation changes. So a rail company, this would be really the only way they would be able to get a rail track down through here. This is what finally bankrupts Mesa Southern. This would have been a very expensive undertaking to get this done. But this is also the pressures the railroads were under at this time. There was a huge pressure to connect the East Coast to the West Coast, and it was kind of a bit of a race. So we can imagine this was probably part of that. This might have been the only acceptable route to get through this region and connect up to points farther west and eventually to the West Coast. The company would have been under immense pressure to build this. I'm just going to go back in here and fix up some of the river. It's getting a little narrow in some sections, just trying to smooth out some of the lumps and bumps here. I wanted to connect the rail line up to our main cargo hub on the other side of town, but I didn't plan for it ahead of time, and there was no way to really connect the rail up without tearing up a huge chunk of the city. That's not how this would work here. The rail line would have been here first and the town would have grew up around it. So now that I've actually built the town, I can't realistically come back and tear it up. So I have to make another smaller cargo station down by the river here to accommodate the cargo traffic going through the canyon. This also seemed like a perfect opportunity to finalize the detailing and the building and the detailing for this particular part of town. I imagine it out along the highway here to be kind of like light industry and probably a few big retail box stores. So I found this wonderful Home Depot asset on the mod store, which I'm going to place right here. Just beside it here, I'm going to be using this Target asset as well. Once again, another nice, beautiful looking asset. Of course, both these retailers would require large parking lots. And I'm just snaking the road up the hillside here for future development. It seemed appropriate right along the highway here to have a McDonald's. So we're going to place that down there. For up on this little hillside here, I thought this would make a perfect location for a modern residential development, a little suburb. I'm just going to spend a little time flattening out a little bit of the terrain. I'm not going to get crazy with it. I don't want to erase terrain features, but also imagine that they would have came in here with some heavy machinery to flatten out the location before they started construction on residential homes. I imagine for a more modern housing development, it's not really necessarily going to conform to a grid, so I'm just doing kind of a bit of a wavy pattern here. I'm just kind of winging it. I don't really have a clear idea in my head at this time how this should look. For the houses I'm going to be using for this development, I'm going with the Southwest Region Pack. I think these are almost all exclusively level 5s, and I'm doing that because I want kind of a repetitive house style, as if it was a single developer that came in here and built all the houses for this location. I'll come back in a little later and space out the houses a little better. I also realized that it probably is a good location for an elementary school. I'm just going to put a small one here. I thought about attaching the gymnasium, but it doesn't really fit. It doesn't look appropriate behind the houses like this. So I'm just going to remove that. I am falling a little bit behind on my education services. Elementary in particular is falling behind. High school is still, we're kind of borderline for high school. We have one college that's serving all the needs for the city at the moment, so I don't need to worry about that right now. Also, it didn't seem appropriate to stick an expansion onto this one either. So this is just going to be a very tiny elementary school, just kind of serving this particular neighborhood. I'm also going to be putting in a few office buildings here, not too many. I don't have any office demand, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to place a lot of this down. Also, I'm going to be putting in some smaller commercial buildings here. I'm using a few of the Japanese assets here. They have a nice modern look about them, which seems appropriate for this location. And can't have enough parking out here. Now you can see that I'm starting to develop huge traffic problems. Most of this traffic here is due to the commercial developments. A lot of people coming down here for the big box stores, but also people trying to get to work. Also, we're just getting a lot more, because of that densification I did at the very beginning of the episode, I'm getting a lot more traffic on all the bridges right now. What happens is it kind of starts distracting me. And I get kind of like sucked into trying to figure out traffic issues for like a couple days. It was just, I'm not very good at traffic management. And after numerous attempts to try to fix things and nothing really working, I decided it was time maybe for a fourth bridge crossing. This seemed like the most logical area for it because there's not a lot of development here yet. And we can disrupt some of these neighborhoods on the west side here to connect the new main road up to the existing network. I imagine the areas directly adjacent to the bridge will now be commercial. It made sense to just continue this road all the way up. And on the east side, we have to also increase road capacity as well. So we're going to delete out a few residential buildings here. Make a few adjustments. And continue our 4-lane road up to this intersection here and to straighten out some of the mess. Also restrict some of the Okay, that's what it looks like with our new bridge crossing. Now, I'm still having major traffic issues. Everybody's trying to get down into the neighborhood I just rebuilt here. I decide it's time to get a little more aggressive with our road layout, and the road that follows the river here, we're going to be upgrading this to a 4-lane. I realize here that this is the wrong road I'm putting in here. I will realize that that's the wrong road I'm putting in. Now I have this kind of awkward connection at the far end here. There's no good way to connect this up to what's existing here. So I'm going to connect it with a series of one-way roads. So it's going to be a one-way road coming off that one, and then yeah, here's where I realized I made a mistake. Come back and fix that. Okay, and have another one-way road going in the opposite direction. Just make sure everything's going in the right direction there. To accommodate the increase in traffic, I decided that on the west side of the river to add some off ramps. This kind of makes a bit of a mess of the riverfront here, and makes for a very complicated road system down here along the river. It's a bit messy. I'm imagining, this is the city doing a whole bunch of like half measures to try to accommodate traffic rather than doing like proper infrastructure upgrades due to probably budget constraints, that sort of thing. So yeah, this whole section down here it's really kind of awkward. Probably the residents of the city probably hate this area, or trying to drive through here. Also, just getting the road networks here to behave It was a bit finicky. It took a bit of moving things around and adjusting things to get things to look appropriate. Also needed to remove some of the inappropriate crossings here. So yeah, this is not an elegant solution. I also want to get rid of parking down here. I don't need parking spaces cluttering up what's already kind of a really busy section of town. Checking out some of these bridge crossings, like right down here, becomes highly problematic. We got tons of pedestrians using the pedestrian crossing here over the river. And I have this like awkward piece of land down here and I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, well, maybe this would be a good location to put an historic building, something that the city would not want to destroy and would have to have built around. Since I have a school shortage here, I thought this would be a good location for maybe what might be a private school. I'm using the static versions of the German elementary and high school here. I don't have the space to put the actual functioning asset, but I'm going to use the static version and add my own zoning cubes to it to give it functionality. Going to draw on a surface here to anchor it to the ground. I've added about 1,000 elementary school slots and about 500 high school slots to this location, which went a long way to alleviate my education issues. Now I'm just going to spend a bit of time doing a bit of landscape detailing around the building, blending it into the riverfront here, make it look like it's been here for 100 years. I'm using Giga XM's grass surfaces here. We have to be careful with placing this. It will kind of like lay on top of all surfaces, so that's why I have to trace out the actual path network here. For the trees, I'm using the contour lines here to make sure I get them on the hillside. So the flat areas up by the school are going to be obviously just grass, and then the hillsides are going to be covered in trees. I'm also spending a bit of time making sure I'm placing trees where the two grass surfaces meet. There's a bit of a hard edge there, so I'm just using the trees to kind of disguise that a bit so it's not so obvious. and a little bit of brick edging here to finish off. Now we have this little section of the river down here. I wanted to do this. This was kind of more what I was hoping to do in this episode. It was more just a lot of landscape detailing along the canyon river area, trying to make it look more appropriate. I didn't really have enough time to get to it this episode, but I did a little test section here in town. I have this area directly under the pedestrian walkway here where it looks a bit like a raised section of the river. And I kind of imagine this might be like a narrows in the river where it was like, really, really like solid rock surfaces and stuff, where the river was kind of forced through more of a narrow channel. So this is a bit of an experiment. I'm just playing around with it, seeing how this will look, how this will work. I'm quite happy with how this turned out. I do need to play around with it a bit more. I don't think I've got it quite perfect here. I think for a first attempt, it's pretty good. So yeah, right directly under the pedestrian walkway here, like this raised area, I thought, well, maybe this is like solid rock here, so the river is kind of forced to flow around it. Just recolor all the rocks so they match our native rock colors. And I'm going to be using some of Sully's seafoam decals here to kind of simulate shallow water, rapids, that sort of stuff. It's imperfect, but from a bit of a distance, and if you don't look too closely, I think it actually looks okay. I'm going to be spending a bit of time just finishing off some of the surface detailing on the east bank of the river. Future plan is to add another pedestrian bike path on the east side of the river. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, so I'm just going to add some grass surfaces here for the time being. I will have to come in and delete those out and redo it again at some point. I have this pocket of residential houses here that no longer makes sense. I'm going to be increasing the density here to kind of match the rest of the neighborhood. And I thought maybe it's time to add a slightly taller building to our cityscape. Going to go with this one, something kind of nondescript, but still taller than everything else for the moment. And just fill in the rest of the area with medium density residential and some mixed use buildings as well. For the location where our crematorium used to be, I thought this would be a good location for some more office buildings. It seems to be becoming the center of office development for the city. Using a northeast asset here, I'm just going to recolor it white. I think that looks a little more appropriate for this build. Beside it here in this lot, I wasn't sure. This seemed a little too tall. It may be in the future, but not quite yet. So we're just going to go with some nondescript, low-density office building here for the time being. Okay, for the rest of this episode, I'm going to be detailing out this area around our cargo terminal and industrial area. What I'd be trying to do is try to find a way to simplify some of the detailing a bit, so I'm not spending so much time on the detailing, but still getting a really good result that looks decent from a bit of a distance. not every area needs like to be detailed, 100%. Right now, I'm just trying to imagine what types of industries might be down by the highway here. Keeping in mind that Redmont is mostly a resource-based economy, so it would have some industries here that would reflect that. I'm trying different surfaces here with the rail line. As you can see, I'm still struggling to find something that works well on this landscape. Everything I've tried so far doesn't really look right to me. The trees and bushes would be densest right along the river edge. Now I do have some terrain issues here. We are on a bit of a slope. Just to get the building to sit a little better, just decided to put it up on a raised section here. I suppose what I'm building here might be a bit of foreshadowing for our next small town I'm going to be building. I imagine this is like a collection point for logs before they get loaded onto the rail cars here. So over the last few episodes, I've been kind of developing kind of like a procedure for detailing. How I've been kind of going about it is the first thing I do is place all the major assets, all the buildings, all the important things like that. Then the next step I do is come in and draw in all the base, like a base surface. That's kind of like what's going to sit underneath all of it. Like for right down here, I'm using the oil industry surface as a kind of a base surface. And then on top of that, I'll come in and start layering up different decals and stuff to kind of blend everything together and make it look a little more natural than just the stark surfaces that the game gives you. So it's a bit of a layering process, like first the asset, then the main surfaces, and then all the decals on top of it to give it all the detail. I've been kind of like refining that and trying to get it down into like a system that's repeatable and it goes fairly quickly. So I'm not spending so much time being consumed with all the detailing, and it's just a quicker process overall. For the cargo yard here, these really bother me because they always look way too pristine. So I'm going to add some different surfaces here to kind of break it up and make it give it a bit more wear and tear. And these are fairly unkept areas, so there'd be lots of weeds and bushes and stuff growing along the edges of the properties and that sort of stuff. I just try to find some appropriate signage here for the buildings. I don't really have much to say for the rest of the detailing here, so I'm just going to play some music and get on with it. that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. I really do apologize. This episode's a bit of a mess. It's really kind of disjointed. Quite a bit of it was actually missing, unfortunately. I will see you all in the next episode. Hopefully next episode we're back at Monte Palma for a little bit. I've been neglecting it. I know, I do apologize. But Monte Palma was also having its own technical problems, which were a little worse than Redmont, unfortunately. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.